All right, it passed. It was close, but 215 to 214, the big, beautiful bill leaves the House, goes to the Senate. There's already opposition. Let's play a little bit of our Rob Schmidt speaking with Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson about his objections to the bill.
Has there been any movement on this bill for fiscal hawks like yourself?
Nothing significant. I mean, they're getting down the weeds and they're tweaking this program, tweaking that program, maybe making some minor improvements. But again, that's you're missing the forest that's on fire for the twigs and leaves, quite honestly. We're not looking at really bending the spending curve down to any significant amount. $1.5 trillion plus the additional spending, it's about a 1.3% reduction in projected spending. That's it. That's paltry.
Ooh, all right. So a signal of what's to come. Let's bring in our panel to weigh in. On the right, we have the president of the National Federation of Republican Women, Julie Harris, with us this Friday. And on the left, Democratic strategist and former Harris campaign political director for the state of North Carolina, Mally Smith. All right, Senator Johnson is not alone in his objections. He says there's actually 4 Senate Republican conservatives who will vote against the House bill just as it's drafted. Rand Paul's a no, narrow majority, 53 to the Dems, 47. You know, Julie, ultimately at the end of the day, there's still a sense that they are going to get this done and that President Trump's vision will be carried out with the Republican majority. But there's questions about not trimming enough spending. What do you think of Johnson and the holdouts' arguments here?
Well, the big, beautiful bill brings much-needed relief that America has waited long enough on. It brings tax cuts for the working families, support for American manufacturers, support to secure the border. Now, while the senators certainly will refine and fine-tune and tweak, as they say, the details, and that is understandable, the core promises to the American people are non-negotiable. I think that Leader Thune understands the urgency, and I understand that he's meeting with them one-on-one and in small groups to try to work out those details. And the American people will be patient. They understand that great legislation requires great leaders, and we have that in Senator Thune and in Speaker Johnson. So I feel very optimistic that we're going to get this bill through, and I'm okay with some fine-tuning. That's what they were elected to do.
You know, Mally, on the left, we saw Hakeem Jeffries saying, stop it in its tracks. No doubt they will try, but they don't have the majority. So a lot of this will be a messaging issue for Democrats. But pick up on what Julie said. A lot of Americans are saying this is needed reform and relief.
Yeah, I think the Senate is going to have a very similar problem to what the House has. You have House Freedom Caucus members who thought this bill didn't do enough to address the deficit. You're going to have deficit hawks in the Senate who agree. You're going to have moderates who are worried about the Medicaid cuts and the SNAP cuts. So, you know, the House bill moved a bit more in the conservative direction in a few aspects to get across the line. It'll be interesting to see if the Senate moves in the same direction or if the moderates are louder and they're going to have to make the bill more moderate to pass. So we're going to have to see how that shakes out. But regardless, I do think this is a good messaging opportunity for the Democrats because this bill is going to add around $3.8 trillion to the deficit and kick millions of people off their health care, all to give a tax cut to the wealthy. So I think this is an opportunity for the Democrats to paint a clear contrast.
We know that the messaging will continue very divisive here. There's something, though, that a lot of Americans were shocked in, no matter what political spectrum, as we should be, the murder of 2 young Israelis in our nation's capital. We're learning the father of the suspect, the Chicago man, Elias Rodriguez, was actually at President Trump's joint address this past March. His name's Eric Rodriguez, an Iraq war vet, the guest of Democratic Illinois Congressman Jesus Garcia. I'll let you each weigh in. Obviously, this is a very troubling story. Our Logan Raddick was talking about his ties to radical groups. Julie, what's happening when you think that there's guests and there's families and there's still this sort of acceptance of Jew hate, which is now bubbling up to an incomprehensible place in our country?
Yeah, this is an especially hard topic for me to talk about. I knew Sarah. The National Federation of Republican Women care about our international relations. So we often reach out to our allies and our friends, and Israel was one that we were actively working to strengthen our friendship and our ties with them. And that took us to the embassy. And so we had met Sarah. We had worked with Sarah. We're currently working with Sarah to strengthen those ties. And she was such a warm and gracious host when you would visit the embassy. It is tragic. This is hard to comprehend, the violent language that we see coming from the left and that we see coming on the college campuses that dehumanize the whole Jewish people, all of them, home here in the U.S. and abroad, and calling for their annihilation. What expected? This is an expected outcome of that. You cannot spread that type of violent language and not see eventually this type of terrible tragedy. I don't know much about the father. I was surprised to hear that he had been at the address and that he was hailed as this is one of the best of our communities. So more details will come. Not sure that where he stands on this.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing what you knew about the victim, Sarah. Let me let Mally jump in for the final word here. Obviously, there's a lot we're going to hear about this suspect.
Sure. First, I want to offer my condolences to the families of the victims. America really needs to do everything in its power to make sure we condemn anti-Semitism and try to root out anti-Semitism wherever it may lie. But anti-Semitism is not something that is solely on the left. President Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes, someone who is a neo-Nazi and a white supremacist, and Kanye West, a man who sells swastika shirts. So if my colleague on the right is very worried about anti-Semitism,
we've also had, let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to what we're seeing on campuses and Ilhan Omar's daughter being among those arrested, and the fact that on the radical left they have stayed silent. It's a longer conversation, but I mean, you're going into a place where it's really, we got to maybe fact check you on some of the other stuff, because the Trump administration right now is doing everything it can. And it seems like institutions are doing everything they can to protect some radical stuff happening on the campus, leading to increased violence. Let's just leave it there. We'll have you back. We will.
Tariff on Israel.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mally. Thanks, Julie. Always appreciate getting both sides of everything. We'll have you back when we have more time. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break.